Hey there, Ruth Haven Grounds family. Today I'm sharing something that completely changed my fertilizing game, and I bet you've got everything you need sitting in your kitchen right now. We're talking about the green smoothie method for creating liquid nitrogen fertilizer, and before you think I've lost my mind mixing gardening with breakfast prep, hear me out. This technique has saved me countless trips to the garden center and given my plants the greenest, most vibrant growth I've seen in years. I stumbled onto this method during a particularly abundant summer when my yard was overflowing with grass clippings and weeds that I'd normally toss in the compost bin. My blender was sitting there, and I thought, why not speed up the process? What happened next was pure gardening magic, and I've been refining this technique ever since. Let's talk about what makes this method so powerful. When you blend fresh green plant material with water, you're creating what I call instant compost tea on steroids. Those grass clippings, young weeds, and fresh leaves are absolutely packed with nitrogen. And here's the beautiful part. By blending them into a liquid, you're breaking down cell walls and releasing nutrients that would normally take weeks or months to become available through traditional composting. The nitrogen in fresh green material is in its most accessible form. We're talking about the same nutrient that makes your plants grow lush, helps them produce chlorophyll, and gives you those deep green leaves that signal a thriving garden. When you process these materials in a blender, you're creating a liquid fertilizer that your plants can absorb almost immediately through both their roots and leaves. The best part about this method is that your ingredients are probably growing in your yard right now, possibly in places where you don't even want them. I've used everything from grass clippings to dandelion leaves, young nettle shoots, comfrey, clover, and even those pesky chickweed patches that seem to appear overnight. Here's what I look for when gathering materials. Fresh, young green growth is your best friend. Young plants have higher nitrogen content than mature ones, which is why I love using the first few inches of weed growth before they go to seed. Grass clippings from a lawn that hasn't been treated with chemicals are fantastic, especially if you catch them right after mowing. I've found that comfrey, if you have access to it, is like the MVP of this method because it's incredibly nutrient dense. One critical rule though, avoid anything that's gone to seed unless you want to volunteer plants everywhere you apply this fertilizer. Trust me, I learned this lesson the hard way when my tomato beds became a dandelion nursery. Also, stay away from diseased plant material or anything that might carry pathogens you don't want spreading through your garden. Now let's get into the actual method, and I promise it's ridiculously simple. I use an old blender that I've designated for garden use because while this stuff is natural and safe, your morning smoothie just hits differently when your blender smells like lawn clippings. You can often find cheap blenders at thrift stores for exactly this purpose. Start with a ratio of about 1 part fresh green material to 2 parts water. I typically pack my blender about halfway with chopped or torn plant material, then fill it with water, leaving an inch or two at the top for expansion. If you're using really fibrous material like thick grass stems, chop them up a bit first to avoid burning out your blender motor. Blend on high for about 30 to 60 seconds. You're aiming for a consistency somewhere between a smoothie and a soup, a bright green liquid with small particles suspended throughout. It won't be completely smooth, and that's perfectly fine. Those plant particles will continue breaking down after application. Here's where it gets interesting. I let this mixture sit for anywhere from a few hours to overnight before using it. This steeping time allows even more nutrients to leach into the water, creating a more potent fertilizer. During warmer months, I don't let it sit longer than 24 hours because it can start to smell pretty intense as fermentation begins, and your neighbors might start asking questions. The way you apply this liquid fertilizer makes a huge difference in results. I've experimented extensively, and here's what works best in different situations. For a quick nitrogen boost during active growth periods, I dilute my green smoothie fertilizer with additional water at a ratio of about 1 part smoothie to 3 or 4 parts water. This diluted version is just perfect for watering around the base of plants, and honestly, I've found it's gentle enough to use weekly during peak growing season without any risk of burning roots. When I'm dealing with plants that are showing nitrogen deficiency, those telltale yellowing lower leaves, I go stronger with a 1 to 2 dilution. I also use this mixture as a foliar spray, which just means I'm spraying it directly onto the leaves using a pump sprayer. The leaves can absorb nutrients incredibly quickly this way, and I've seen plants green up within just a few days. For foliar application, go ahead and strain your mixture through cheesecloth or even an old t-shirt first to avoid clogging your sprayer. Apply early in the morning or late in the evening to prevent leaf burn from sun exposure, and make sure to spray both the tops and undersides of leaves where absorption happens most efficiently. What's actually happening here from a soil biology perspective is fascinating. When you apply this blended plant material, you're feeding not just your plants, but the entire soil food web. The microorganisms in your soil go absolutely wild for this stuff, and as they break down any remaining plant particles, they're creating humus, improving soil structure, and making even more nutrients available. The nitrogen in fresh plant material is primarily in organic forms that soil microbes convert into forms plants can use. This biological process happens relatively quickly with pre-processed material like our smoothie fertilizer, much faster than if you just laid whole grass clippings on the soil surface. I've also noticed that regular applications improve my soil's water retention capacity over time. The organic matter we're adding with each application helps soil hold moisture more effectively, which means less frequent watering and, honestly, happier plants during hot spells. Not all plants want the same nitrogen levels, and this is where you can really fine-tune your approach. My heavy feeders like tomatoes, corn, squash, and leafy greens get the full strength treatment with more frequent applications. These plants are nitrogen hungry, and, honestly, they respond with explosive growth when their needs are met. For herbs and plants where I want to encourage flowering rather than just leafy growth, I ease up considerably. Too much nitrogen on basil, for instance, gives you huge leaves, but less of that essential oil that makes it aromatic. Flowering plants and fruiting vegetables benefit from nitrogen early in their growth, but really need less as they transition to reproduction. Root vegetables get a moderate approach. While they need nitrogen for healthy top growth, too much sends all their energy into leaves, rather than developing those roots and tubers we're actually growing them for. I typically apply this fertilizer to carrots, beets, and potatoes only during their early growth stages. What I love most about this method is how it closes the loop in my garden ecosystem. Instead of bagging up grass clippings and weeds for municipal pickup, I'm transforming potential waste into valuable plant nutrition. This feels like true sustainability, using what my property provides to feed itself. I've also found this practice changes how I view weeds. Those plants we're constantly fighting aren't just invaders anymore, they're a renewable fertilizer resource. I actually get a little excited when I see a fresh crop of chickweed or clover now because I know it's free fertilizer in the making. The cost savings are real too. I used to spend a decent chunk of money each season on liquid fertilizers, and while I still use commercial products occasionally for specific purposes, the green smoothie method handles probably 80% of my nitrogen fertilization needs now. Over the years of perfecting this technique, I've run into a few bumps worth mentioning. If your mixture develops an overpowering ammonia smell, you've let it ferment too long. It's still usable, but dilute it more heavily before application. That ammonia smell means nitrogen is being released in gaseous form, which is wasteful. If you notice any adverse effects on plants after application, like wilting or brown leaf edges, you're probably applying it too strong or too frequently. So, just scale back on concentration and frequency. Remember that more isn't always better with fertilizers, even organic ones. Some gardeners worry about attracting pests with this method, and honestly, I haven't found it to be an issue. The smell dissipates quickly, especially when you're applying diluted versions, and any intact plant particles break down within days. This green smoothie method has become such a cornerstone of how I garden that I can't imagine going back to my old ways. There's something deeply satisfying about creating fertility from materials that most people consider trash, and the results speak for themselves in the vibrant health of my plants. I'd love to hear about your experiences if you try this technique. What materials are you using? What dilution ratios work best in your garden? Drop a comment below and let's learn from each other. And if you found this helpful, do me a favor and subscribe to Ruth Haven Grounds so you don't miss future gardening insights. Share this with a fellow gardener who might benefit from transforming their yard waste into plant power. Together, we're building a community of gardeners who work smarter, not harder, to create thriving gardens. Happy growing, and I'll see you in the next video.